Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming down today for this panel discussion about best practices in training employees in the healthcare setting when it comes to cybersecurity. I am joined today by Kathy Hughes, Chief Information Security Officer and Vice President of Northwell Health System, Mr. John Bosco, the CIO and Senior Vice President at Northwell Health, and Kyle Metcalf, the CEO of Inspired eLearning. Inspired eLearning conducts training for employees in cybersecurity best practices. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Kathy, I wanted to ask you quickly, since you really are in charge of the safety and security of 68,000 employees when it comes to cybersecurity at this company. How do you budget the time, realistically, to train them when they have so many other roles and responsibilities to do?
That's a good question. We have a dedicated security team that focuses on training and nothing but training. And we use a variety of methods to try to reach the 68,000 employees, which include things like simulated phishing campaigns, intranet postings, digital signage, posters. We also leverage social media. And we also try to make our training as engaging as possible where we get people involved. The team that I have has a manager and about 3 people, and they just constantly work with other areas, including our corporate compliance group, our corporate security group, and our engineering and operations team, security engineering and operations team, to really understand what the threats are so that they can target the training and make the best use of their time to get the most important messages out to the health system.
How do you work with John when it comes to training and security awareness?
So I report to John. So we meet regularly, and this is one of the key topics that we talk about, not only together, but on the various committees that we participate on, and with our board. We have a board of trustees. And so we are constantly communicating to them. We have top-down executive level support for the program, and we work together to identify what those key topics are that employees should be trained on, and we work on that together. We publish a plan for the year. We revise it as time goes on, because as things happen in the environment, we want to adjust our plan accordingly.
John, when it comes to the biggest threats to the organization, as far as information and the technology, what would you say those are for the biggest threats cybersecurity-wise?
Well, for Northwell, the threats are really to our brand and our reputation and the trust that our patients put in us when they come to see us. We hold a lot of information about them. We transmit that information to insurance companies and other various places, and so we take very seriously our obligation to protect that information as well as we can.
Kyle, how often do you come across a company that is as organized and structured when it comes to security awareness as Northwell?
I wish a lot more. The company historically worked with very savvy large enterprise customers who knew exactly what they wanted, had teams of folks that were able to deploy it, would customize the content. And while we still have those customers, the larger market, unfortunately, is incredibly unsavvy and resource constrained. So what we try to do is take the best practices of folks like these and package them up into an easy to consume and easy to deploy format so everyone can have posters and signage and training and phishing simulation, et cetera. But an example we talked about earlier was the CISO is the ultimate decision maker. This is no small company on the security training, and so we work with that person, but then an unpaid intern was responsible for rolling out, deploying, and managing the program. And so in that scenario, it's really difficult to ask them, what are you looking for? How is this best served? So we try to be very prescriptive in those scenarios, because unfortunately, not everyone has it as buttoned up as they do.
Kathy, when it comes to training your employees, how important is that for you and as far as a priority? And just give me a little bit of background on how much outside help you've gotten as far as consulting for this, and how much you've developed internally on your own and with your manager and their team.
So security is our #1 priority when it comes to protecting the environment, because people are the last line of defense. So despite all the technologies and policies that you might have in place, it really comes down to the person to make sure that they're protecting patient data and our environment. So we invest a lot of time and effort. We understand that that's the reality. Healthcare is a #1 target for cyber attack, and phishing is the most common mechanism that's used. And we recognize that. So we do develop targeted training for specific groups of people, based on their role, based on their location, based on what's meaningful to them. So for example, clinicians, we tend to appeal to their sense of caring. For people in roles where they handle money, we try to appeal to their role and stress the importance of protecting data so that it's not compromised. We do engage outside firms. We do use a phishing simulation tool that creates the phishing campaigns and provides results and all kinds of analytics and tools. We're able to track our repeat offenders. We're able to know who clicked and who didn't on links or attachments. We also measure what's called resiliency, which is the number of reporters divided by the number of clickers. And that's a common metric that's now used to gauge the effectiveness. We also leverage company to create computer-based training programs for us, where they have snippets that we're able to customize. And we also create our own internal training material, specifically for our annual corporate compliance training that we're required to do, and other training that we make available specifically towards those targeted repeat offenders that have a tendency to have difficulty understanding, the importance of this.
How do you handle those repeat offenders?
So we always, all of our simulations have teachable moments where we give immediate feedback and training and point out signs that they missed. We also keep track of who does that on a repeated basis, and we're now requiring them to attend an online training program. And we are developing a live classroom training program for those who really just show repeated behavior. We're putting together what we're calling a disciplinary matrix that shows that progression. So that's still a work in progress, but that's the direction that we're heading.
Right. We've also built into our HR policies the obligations of our employees in terms of promoting safe cyber practices, so that they understand that from a behavioral point of view, it's not optional. They are required, it's measured as part of their performance, that they practice safe practices every day, and that when there are issues that we can come back to them, and they could eventually be subject to disciplinary actions if they show that they are a multi-repeat offender. So we haven't reached the point yet where we've taken disciplinary actions on anyone. We're moving in that direction. I really think that that's necessary, that an employee understands that when they come here, this isn't just something nice that we need them to do. They're our last line of defense in protecting, as I said, our brand and our patients' information. And so I think we, and as an industry, need to get to the point where when employees remain susceptible or they just refuse to do the things that keep our system safe, that they could potentially suffer disciplinary action for that. And so I think that's the direction that we're moving in, and I think that's what it's going to take. It needs to be part of their obligation as an employee who is working here.
Kyle, would you agree with that, that's probably the best approach?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, there has to be some sort of teeth in the agreement, and everyone needs to understand what that is. The flip side of it, and something that we deal with internally, is there are mistakes, and then there are different severities of mistakes. Accidentally clicking a link in an email that you received and then immediately reporting it is very different than clicking a link, going to a web page and entering in your confidential
password. Right.
Yeah, that very, very different scenarios. And so it's not fully black and white, so there is a little bit of gray area in there, but yes, there has to be a plan, and fairly to the employees, it has to be communicated frequently on the importance of it and what could happen if mistakes are made.
What makes it so different to be doing this kind of training in a healthcare company? I know that hospitals and healthcare facilities are one of the, if not the biggest, target for ransomware attacks and phishing scams. So what makes it different versus another type of company?
Well, the value of protected health information, or PHI, and PII, which is just personally identifiable information, is very valuable on the black market. So, typically a credit card on the black market gets between $1 and $3 per record, or per record of information, versus a PHI record, which can get up to $50, $60. And that's because of the value of the data. It can be used for things like filing false tax claims, insurance fraud, prescriptions, obtaining medical services and procedures. And because there is such a lag in healthcare from when a charge is actually incurred till the time a person actually knows about it, by the time it goes through insurance processing and such and billing, most people don't know that they've even been a victim of identity theft. So it's because of that, that information is very valuable, and that's why healthcare is targeted. And now health systems are really reliant on electronic medical records. There's no more paper folders anymore. They rely on that information, and the cyber criminals know that. So if they can disrupt operations, they know that our industry is more probably would probably consider more paying the ransom if that were what the malware attack was about.
And I think the structure of healthcare organizations makes it challenging as well, especially someone as large as us. We're 23 hospitals. Each of those hospitals has a slightly different culture that reflects the community that they serve. We have a very large ambulatory network, almost 700 physician practices that are in many hundreds of different facilities. Physical facilities, and so we're a very diverse and dispersed company, and getting out to 700 separate physician practices, right, to make sure that they're all getting the same level of training. When we go in and we do assessments to make sure that they're conforming to HIPAA rules, we physically go into each one of them. Every few years, we do a certain number of them every year, but we're physically going into 700 different facilities, or 400 or 500, because some of them are combined. But just the physical disbursement of them makes it a big challenge. And each physician practice has its own little culture, and it's different from other physician practices. And so we have researchers at 5 of our tertiary campus hospitals, as well as in a big research building. Researchers are very different people, and practice, do their jobs in very different ways than physicians and nurses do it. Sure. They tend to be need access to a lot of data. They're on the internet. They're transferring data all over the world. They are very different than the rest of our employee population. So healthcare organizations are just very complex, diverse, and when you're as big as ours physically, decentralized organizations that really add to the challenge of training and protecting.
So Kyle, if you had a customer that was as huge and diverse and multifaceted as Northwell, how would you manage or help them manage that challenge?
Sure. For companies this complex, we roll out role-based training. So you always want to have a fundamental as a baseline up front to ensure that everyone has received the same type of training that covers the full gamut. But then you have different, as I mentioned, there's different types of personalities and different types of threats for different types of roles. People who are on the phone a lot, there's more social engineering. People that are handling credit cards, there's PCI that we want to deal with. Physicians and folks in the office that have access to sensitive information, more HIPAA training. Executives, 10 minutes, no more, right? That we know that will take it. So we've developed a lot of role-based training that will help organizations roll out based on the types of, again, personalities, roles, and even physical locations of their employees. We have oil companies with folks that are sitting in the middle of third world countries or on a oil pump in the middle of the ocean. And so we'll do mobile-based training that they can download and we can get out to their folks.
So Kathy, how many healthcare devices and Internet of Things devices do you have to probably manage and train when it comes to employee security and safety on those devices?
Mm-hmm. So we do allow people to use their own devices. We do require, though, in order for them to do that, that we have to put our mobile device management software on there so that we can control the content that we want to make available or the systems that they have access to, and that's kept separate from their personal information, which we don't have access to. But we want to make sure when they're using that device to access our systems that they are doing it in a secure way. So we do have policies regarding bring your own devices and Internet of Things devices, and we do make sure that we have the technology to support that along with education and training on best practice, like making sure you enter your password or don't leave it in an open area, things like that. So there's a lot of training that's focused on that as well.
In sheer numbers, we probably have about 70,000 endpoint devices between laptops and desktops and so on. We have about 200,000 medical devices. CAT scans and MRIs and ultrasounds and all the different types of medical equipment. So it's a very, very large fleet, combined with having 400 or 500 different physical locations that this equipment is in between our ambulatory and hospital network. That really makes it challenging.
So just curious, John, since it's the first time you and I got to sit down together, I've had an interview with Kathy before, and Kyle, of course. How long have you been with Northwell?
15 years. Most of that time in this role. I started with Northwell as the Chief Technology Officer, so I was much more involved on the technology side in my prior role, but then moved into this role. So it's been quite a while.
Yeah, but there's a reason I'm asking, and I'm just curious, with someone with your background and expertise, how have you seen the corporate culture change when it comes to security and cybersecurity?
It's changed dramatically, fortunately. I don't think you have to go back that many years when there was a lot less in terms of IT investments in the healthcare industry. In terms of information being electronic and being online. Even the electronic medical record revolution really didn't start until 2009, 2010 when the legislation came out.
Right.
So, and that was only 8 or 9 years ago, 10 years ago at the most. So it hasn't been that long that healthcare has had so much medical information accessible online that needed to be protected.
And that changed things drastically.
That changed things. That's really what changed things, as well as just the awareness and the, and the whole cybersecurity problem that I don't think in healthcare 7 or 8 years ago we were really talking very much about. We probably had a few people in IT security back then. And now we have a very, very large IT security organization that we spend tens of millions of dollars a year on that we just didn't do in the past. I think that's the reason that healthcare, in large part, is still catching up. Because it's been robust and successful organizations like us that fortunately I've had the opportunity to work at, but that have the means to protect information and make investments in IT security like we're making. If you're a small physician office or you're a mid-sized or smaller hospital and you're fighting every day to keep the front doors open economically because, the healthcare provider space in this country, we're all under duress economically, you have a tough time being able to make these investments. And we very often see, as we grow and expand and new physician practices or hospitals join the Northwell family, that they have not invested a lot in IT security.
Once that practice joins the Northwell umbrella and the family, how much cybersecurity training do you bring them up to speed with?
We have what we call our M&A playbooks. We go through this a lot. In fact, for the last few years, we have acquired a new physician practice once a week.
Wow, that's fast.
In 2019, that number is going to be almost double. And so we have new physician practices joining on a constant basis. And we have playbooks that we use in IT on how we do that. And security is probably the #1 priority. We get in while we're still talking about them becoming part of Northwell, and we're in doing assessments and understanding that by the time we hit the first day that they will officially be part of Northwell, that we have remediated the most critical security gaps that they might have. And then as we look for them to become a more integrated part of the health system, a lot of that gets scaled. When they officially become connected to our corporate network, that is all scaled by how well how far we've gotten with remediating any security issues that we have found. So they come on board, and if they come on board very quickly for whatever reason, and we haven't had a chance to remediate all the security findings, we don't connect them to our networks.
Interesting. Okay.
And we give them other ways of getting in to do the things they want. They come into a secure remote portal, and we don't actually integrate them fully into the health system until we're comfortable with from an IT point of view, until we're comfortable with what their security posture is.
Interesting.
So all of from an IT point of view, all of our M&A is driven by their security capabilities.
And what we also do is part of that onboarding process is we require all new hires to go through some targeted phishing awareness training, and we also do campaigns just targeted towards them for a year, every few months. So we go through at the new hire training, we provide them with information and training, and then we'll do 4 successive campaigns, because we found that new hires are most susceptible to our campaigns because they're new. And the culture, as John mentioned, where they came from, they may not have promoted that and they might not be aware. So that's been a very effective, and we've seen some positive impact from that.
Yeah, so Kyle, how would you help a company of this size when they are scaling at this rapid pace, bridge that gap and make sure that everyone is in that same security awareness culture?
Sure. It would be a lot of things we've talked about today, where we would establish baseline. We'd work with the teams that were existing to make sure that the content that we provided, the phishing simulations that we've provided, are supportive of their efforts. There's a significant amount of customization going on here. We have our own customization teams, translation teams that work with folks like this to get the content where it needs to be. And then we would really leave it in the hands of the account management and support organization to ensure that as they're acquiring 2 companies a week, it's crazy, they have all the tools that they need from us. We would automate as much of it as we could, and we would hopefully look like an extension of their team versus a vendor.
So, Kathy, real quick before we wrap up, I know that you have a dedicated team about security awareness. How do they effectively drive retention of what everyone is learning?
Yeah, so through a variety of ways. One is we target training through all different communication channels. So as we mentioned, we do screensavers and phishing campaigns. And so everywhere they turn, there should be some type of security awareness that they come across. We also provide a button in their Outlook or their email so that if they suspect an email is suspicious, they can immediately report it. In our phishing simulations, we provide immediate feedback through a teachable moment. We include it in the annual training. And what we try to do is make the training as engaging and as real as possible and cater it to their role or their specific function within the organization. And that tends to, if they can relate to it on a personal level, it tends to stick with them and become part of their, just their behaviors.
I think the key is it has to be constant and ongoing. There's never a break. If you go onto our intranet, there's always something about information security on there. Kathy produces a security newsletter that we hope people look at. We know that some of them do because one very clever thing that they did was to put a little game
contest.
included in it. That's a contest, and so if they answer some basic questions about security, they're in a raffle to win a prize, and so that keeps them engaged. But it's really just a constant, consistent, ongoing reinforcement that that just never stops. I'm sure they now expect that every time they go onto the intranet or every time they're looking at screensavers or whatever it is, that something's going to pop up about cybersecurity. We want it to be top of mind all the time in their heads, and that's really the only way to do it.
So Kyle, how do you come up with programs and plans to help your customers keep cybersecurity on top of mind? Because some people think, oh my God, this is so boring, I don't care, it's fine.
Yeah.
So what's something that you would recommend?
How dare you say it's boring? Educate, assess, and reinforce is the best practice across the industry. And so the education, of course, is going to be all of our content and modules that we build. The assess will be either we call it our PsyQ training, cybersecurity quotient, upfront assessment to see how it does, but there's also testing at the end of the trainings. And then the reinforce can be anything from a micro-learning video, a funny, cartoon style video, to posters that are put up in common areas, digital signage that's put up in common areas. We've had people put our posters in the bathrooms over the urinals, right? Anywhere people are looking and paying attention is where you do reinforcement training, and it isn't always on campaign. Folks that are looking to check the box and run a training once and an assessment once and print out a spreadsheet and call it done, those people are in trouble.
So besides the phishing scams, which we hear a lot about, Kyle, since this is your area of expertise, what should companies such as Northwell and anyone who's watching be paying attention for in the future or in the near future when it comes to areas of vulnerability?
Yeah, you have the legacy vulnerabilities, which are mainly physical, people tailgating, folks that are wandering around the office or in parts of the office where they shouldn't be, looking for sensitive information. But the new threat vectors are vishing, smishing, and USB baiting, all right, which we incorporated into our phishing simulation tool. Vishing being voice phishing. You get a call, hey, something's wrong with something, I need the last four of your social, or they ask you to complete some task. Smishing is SMS text phishing, which would be no different than an email, but it's delivered via text. Hey, I need some sensitive information or you to complete a task. And then USB baiting is on the physical side, but it is someone dropping USB sticks in and around the parking lot or common areas with some sort of malware, cryptojet, some sort of virus loaded on it. And what do you do when you find a USB drive? You pick it up and you stick it in the computer to see what's on it. Well, you've now become infected. So those are the ones today. Tomorrow, who knows?
Something to be aware of.
It'll keep getting more and more advanced.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming down. Kathy, John, Kyle, this has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.